Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Backlog Banter. My name is Tucker Hazell, and this is Dev Dive, a show where I get a chance to talk to interesting game developers about their games. And today, I am joined by Aaron Gordon, game director of Rift of a Necrodancer, a new, really cool rhythm game that I'm excited to talk to him about because I've never interviewed someone about a rhythm game. And so that opens a whole new can of worms of design and everything that we're going to get into. But Aaron, thank you very much for joining me. We worked our way through some technical snafus, and now we are here to talk about video games. It's great. How you feeling?
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is exciting too. This is the first rhythm game that I worked on as well. So it's been a journey and I'd love to chat about it.
Absolutely, yeah. So you say this is the first rhythm game that you've worked on, but I want you to give the audience a little bit of a look into what your history is with game design and your journey into being a games creator. You can start wherever you want, but I'd like to know a little bit of the games you've worked on before coming to Brace Yourself Games and being game director on Rift of the Necrodancer.
I started off in mobile. I was like a design intern for a small mobile company called Mobile Pie. We made some this is back in the day where like Farmville was taking off and we're like, this is awesome. Let's make, a similar game on mobile with these other clients using these IPs.
We're gonna be the next Farmville.
Everybody's going to be the next Farmville. That was just like amazing learning experience for me. I was working with like two other or three other people in a small like office in Bristol in the UK, and just being a fresh out of university game design student, being able to just wheel over to my boss and be like, "What do you think about this?" and just get direct feedback was awesome. I then got a job at Frontier Developments in the UK as a game designer again. So there's a trend here. I've always kind of kept in game design, done some technical game design, but don't trust me to write any code.
Sure,
Like I
sure.
can I can read, but I can't write. At Frontier Developments, I worked on Elite Dangerous, which is a big like space sim. I also worked on Kinect Sports Rivals, which was back when everybody was very excited about the Kinect. And that was again a lot of fun, completely different game design challenge of like the second iteration of the Kinect had awesome technical capabilities, but it's like, what are players actually going to want to do? Because like you're not going to want to sit in your living room and like play soccer and just like swing your leg all the way. What's like a small movement? And it was amazing to walk through the office every day and see like normally a game dev office is everybody at their keyboard, but here it's like people play tennis and people like trying to head things and just wildly gesticulating in front of their desks.
A very different kind of office environment or game design environment working on a motion controlled game like that.
Yeah, yeah, very cool, like interesting challenges. Again, learned a huge amount about game design and level design. We worked with Rare on that game as well, so got to work with some really smart folks there. Then I decided, I'm in my early 20s, I should go do something stupid. Let's go to Canada. Canada seems cool. I put a minimum amount of effort into planning it. I was like, oh, let's go to Vancouver. I've heard about Vancouver. And I looked at flights and I'm like, that's too expensive. That's too far away. What's
Yeah, of
another
course.
bigger city on
Yeah.
Google Maps? If I scroll out, Toronto? It vaguely sounds familiar. Great. So that was a different kind of experience, but it was awesome. Did a bunch of traveling around. I got very lucky again and got a job at Ubisoft Toronto, where I stayed for another 5 years. Got a chance to work on a new original IP there called Starlink Battle for Atlas.
I've got a Starlink right there, I think. I
Oh,
can't really
nice.
read it, but it's unopened, frankly. I'm sorry, but it's sitting there on my shelf. Found it at Best Buy for $5.
Okay, right? It's got a whole saga with it, and I'm really proud of the work we did. Games take a long time, right? This game was 5 years in development. I joined 2 years into a team that was like 10 people, and at Ubisoft Studio AAA, like that's unheard of to have like a 10-person team. And so I got to be really on the ground floor of making like one of the core designers on the team, and
Cool.
it's one of the games where if you point to a rock in that game, I can tell you exactly the procedural script that placed that rock. I can tell you the
Very interesting.
missions that
Yeah.
use that rock. I can tell you other like I know I've touched a lot of that game, and it made me really appreciate the whole holistic game dev process a lot more.
Bad timing, Toys to Life kind of on the downward slide at that point.
Yeah, the team was awesome, and like I really enjoyed it. But yeah, sometimes you just got to do the best you can, and then the markets change. But that was awesome, and yeah, we got to work with Nintendo on that, and it has a whole Star Fox tie-in. One of my best game dev memories is we got to go to E3 the year that the game launched, and Shigeru Miyamoto is on stage.
Talking
with
about your game. Yeah,
talking about my game, and
that's amazing.
there's a photo of me somewhere where like Shigeru Miyamoto is walking down the aisle, and I'm like this,
Yeah, yeah,
I'm like
that's
10
awesome.
feet away from him, and I'm like, "Ugh," my inner child is just melting. And then I worked on Far Cry 6, level design, open world environments. Then moved out to Vancouver, worked at a bunch of other smaller places, and then got a job at Brace Yourself Games as the game design director for the studio. So my job right now is like the design person that gets deployed onto projects to help out and offer design direction and support the team and make sure that what are the game pillars, are all of our game design ideas kind of laddering back up into the game pillars, what's our audience that we're targeting, and I help the team craft player stories, and I help the team, like in game dev there's like thousands of ideas and they're all cool and fun, but then the really tricky part is like being like, okay, we could do all of this, but then what do we do with the team that we have? With player expectations, something that I'm very passionate about with, and I'm happy that we've done with Rift, where we've set players' expectations to be like, you love Crypt, you love Crypt music, you love Danny B music. This game has this, and our trailer, really slaps, and everything is musically accurate. And we bring a bunch of stuff from the old IP from Crypt into the game. So if you loved our characters, we got that. So we try and set player expectations really solidly, and also to meet players, they're expecting difficulty with Rift. And so to be like, hey, we've got that, we called, instead of expert mode, we called it impossible mode, to be
Yes,
like,
you did. Yeah.
we've just made each track in impossible mode as hard as it can possibly be, while maintaining musical accuracy, while maintaining good
Playability. Yeah.
readability,
Hmm.
playability. Yeah. And then we still have easy mode, medium, hard. We still have a sister mode. We have a golden loot mode where you can just jam along and play. So it's really the classic, like, hey, let's open the door for everybody to play. But we know that a big part of our core audience is here for like, I wanna play this track 20 times and get further and further each time. And also, as you know, like rhythm game players are some of the most dedicated players I've ever spoken to. There's a bunch of times where we've been charting a track and I'm like, no one's going to be able to do this perfectly, all perfect, full combo. And then the next day, our playtesting group is like, yeah, what's next? What else you got?
Yeah, of
Like,
course,
full
of
combo
course.
this.
Yeah, so I love that story and the variety of games that you've worked on. Open world games, shooter games, mobile games, motion games, and now a rhythm game. And so I'm really curious to hear from the inception of Rift of the Necrodancer how you got involved with that project and what was kind of the core idea that led to this being the game that it became, and also when it started development. Just give it an idea of like the scope of the project and then how you got involved with it and where it sort of started.
Yeah, absolutely. Game started development around 2022. So about 3 years ago, maybe a little bit more. Games often start off like incubating as prototypes for a while until there's a good time for, we've got team members who are freed up to go work on it. We partnered with TikTok Games to work on this game. They're based in LA and they've been phenomenal to work with. Some of the most talented folks that I've ever worked with. So they've provided a lot of art support, engineering, production, QA, level design as well. And so we've kind of been real code developers on the game. As the inception for Rift, so I joined just after the game was kind of just about to go into production. And so Ryan Clark is the founder of Brace Yourself Games. He's the creator of Rift of the Necrodancer. And his vision for Rift, which really got me hooked, was there's a real big opportunity in rhythm games where there's loads of great rhythm games, but a lot of them kind of play the same. They're kind of like Simon says, right? You have the notes and you play the notes. And that is awesome, but it tests a very specific kind of player skill. It's all about your reaction time and your dexterity. Whereas what Crypt does, what Ryan did with Crypt, is make a game that's all about, strategy. And each puzzle, if you've played Crypt of the Necrodancer, the roguelike tile-based dungeon rhythm game, every enemy like moves on the beat, and in itself, nothing is particularly hard to solve. They're all small puzzles, but you have to do them very fast,
And they add up and you can get overwhelmed.
and you get
Hmm.
overwhelmed. Yeah. So his vision was there's a real opportunity here to bring some of that mechanical differentiation into a rhythm game. And I played the very early prototype, which is basically, if you can imagine Crypt, the art style with 3 lanes, with things coming down, and it just worked immediately.
Sure.
Immediately things
Very
worked.
cool.
And it's like, instead of hitting just one note, you hit a bat that goes middle, left. And so now you're not only sight reading, you're also sight reading, but combining that with your knowledge of the game. And the core concept was just so solid that as you get further and further into the game, we mix up more and more monsters, and they can influence each other. You know that zombies will bounce off of other monsters, so it's not just a case of there's a zombie there. It's like, okay, it's on the left side at the top, so it's probably going to be, you have to kind of track it with in the back of your mind while you're playing. So that's kind of the inception of the game, and things just slotted in really well immediately. We would look at a monster from Crypt, you'd be like, zombies. How do they work in Crypt? They work in this way. Can they work in the same way in Rift? Yes. Bats work in this way in Crypt. How can they work in Rift? And we modified some things to better fit a rhythm game. The other opportunity we saw was, there's loads of rhythm games, but often we found that some of them can look quite intimidating, or
Sure.
I don't want to say obscure, because I don't mean obscure, but I mean like there's a lot of variety, and sometimes things can be very overwhelming for players. And we wanted to provide players something that's like, okay, you play Guitar Hero, it's Guitar Hero with monsters, with mechanics. So every time we went to pitch the game, it's like it's Guitar Hero with mechanics. So instead of hitting a note, that note has different behaviors based on which monster it was. And then we knew that everybody really loved, in terms of the setting, on our socials, we posted a whole bunch of like fan art and bespoke art of, hey, what would it look like if Cadence and her friends were in the modern day? And everybody just loved it. It completely blew up, and the fandom ran with it and created
Yeah.
their own concepts. And we were like, oh, this is a great setting for this game. Why don't we set it in the modern day? And we get to, have everybody who loved Cadence and loved hanging out with those characters still do that, but in a different setting with different interactions. Some of my favorite things in the game are where we have just come out of like brainstorming sessions, or like, how would the Necrodancer use a phone?
Yeah.
Like use a cell phone? Yeah, it's like, well, it's obviously a Nokia 3310. Like he's not going to get the smartphone. He's going to have an old phone. He's not going to use it well. He's going to be on speaker. So we just ran with that. We're like, what would Dove do in the modern world? Oh, she's serene. She'd be a yoga instructor. What would Suzu be like? She's intense. She's fast. She'd be parkour. So yeah, it was just really easy to kind of slot stuff in.
Yeah, it's very cool to know how everything sort of just flowed from that initial idea. But I'm curious in terms of you then getting involved after that initial prototype, after the concept has been generated by that initial team. What did you sort of bring as game director that shaped the game into what it was? Were there any ideas that you remember really being able to shape the game around that made it into a much more robust final project?
For sure, yeah. One of the things I enjoy most about game design is putting things into a box. It's very exciting to go big and think about all the possibilities you can do. But sometimes I think the real challenge in game design is, how do you then bring that back in and make it cohesive and feel intentional and feel like all the systems interlink and work together? So that was mostly my job coming into the project, where like they'd gone big. There was loads of great ideas. There was like, story mode could be like this. It could be, we had prototypes of story mode ages ago that were like, okay, it's like a Persona 5 style map where you go
Yeah,
to
yeah.
different places and affinities for different characters.
Interesting.
And it was really cool. We even had a prototype for a while that was like a roguelike mode, right? Where
Sure.
you have, we were like, okay, what works with Crypt? They expect a roguelike. What would a rhythm roguelike game be? Like, as so it was, we made the map, and you'd play this song, and then you'd increase your health and you get all these
Yeah,
upgrades.
interesting. Hmm.
So my job on the game was like, this is cool. Okay, what are players expecting that are coming here from this game? The rhythm players, they're expecting, this kind of gameplay. They're expecting Crypt characters. What are the core things that rhythm players want? Is they want to try something again and again, and they want to play one song, get better and better each time, and finally clear it and have that triumphant moment. So for our roguelike mode, for example, that we experimented with, it was like, well, this is kind of getting in the way of that, because if you fail a song, you then game over, start the whole run again, and you can't play that song again. So while it was really interesting, it's like okay, let's put that down because it's not.
It doesn't service your audience. Yeah. That's interesting. The idea of roguelike being something that's generative and that isn't the same every time. That is in some way, as you mentioned, kind of the opposite of what a hardcore rhythm player wants to do. Is they want that repetition. They want that accessibility to be able to just press the button, immediately restart when they know they've messed up. So it is a very different appeal.
I'm a big proponent of like there's no one way to design games. It's like you have your tool shed full of tools and full of things to use, and you bring them out when they're needed. It's not a one size fits all. But something I really like doing is really establishing what the core pillars of the game are. And for us, it's like, rhythm based action, the crypt IP, and we want to support the rhythm curious player as well.
Sure. Okay.
Well, so what I love doing is taking the pillars and then be like, okay, how can we support that pillar with what we call a user story? So we'll take a pillar that's like rhythm based action and then create a user story that's like, we want players to be saying this about our game. So for Rift, it's like, as a player, I want to be able to jump into a map and play it again and again to progress further so that I feel triumphant. And then we think, okay, what features can we design that support that user story?
Sure.
And we don't then get tied up in doing everything because then we can have loads of great ideas and we can go, does that support that user story? Not really. Okay, let's put it to the side. So it kind of gets the emotion out of the room. It's, we all have very passionate ideas, but this allows us to look at it objectively. For example, the roguelike stuff, we still captured a piece of this in remix mode
Mm.
in the game. And we reframed it to match players' expectations to be like, if you're going to remix mode, you're here for that kind of variable challenge. Whereas you have the regular game mode where you can just play the same track again and again. If you just love jamming on this track and want to go to remix mode, then this is for you. And then again, we go back to our goals of like, hey, we need to set players' expectations on this. That means that we should lock remix mode behind a small amount of diamonds. And we have diamonds as a currency in the game where you just get them for just playing the game. And our goal with locking remix mode is not because we want to make anything grindy. It's actually the unlocks all pretty quickly. It's just as the first thing you do in the game, we want you to play the charts as designed.
You familiarize yourself with the mechanics.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah.
exactly. So I did a lot of that kind of stuff broadly across the project, and then worked with the designers on the team with new monster designs. I worked on kind of structuring the story. Something I'm very passionate about is divvying up content in a game so it's not overwhelming to the player at the start. So we had lots of early charts for the game that had all the monsters in them, and they were very good. But it was kind of like everything is in every chart, so you don't feel that progression as you play the
Interesting.
game.
Sure, sure, sure.
So something I worked with the team on is restrictions breed creativity. Right, let's restrict the monster variety for
Yeah.
Dove's storyline and her tracks to be the basic monsters only,
Hmm.
and let's pick a certain motif in each song to be like, okay, if this song is all about, we're following the drums in this song, it's all about going like left, 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 right, left, 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 right. Let's keep that motif going so that if players don't remember the song, they kind of fall into that rhythm and pattern and it feels
Yeah,
different.
sure.
And let's make sure to purposefully not use that pattern in the next song so that you feel that something's changed. And then when you progress and unlock the next chapter and you go into Hef and Merlin's chapter, now we introduce zombies for the first
Yeah.
time.
Hmm.
And we make sure that the first track that you play, we send you a zombie like one
Yeah,
at a
so you can
time.
learn it. Yeah, and in some way, I actually really like that in terms of teaching you mechanics because this is a rhythm game where the mechanics are the enemies. The combat, that if you can call it that, is the rhythm, is the enemies and the way that they move. And so it's really the sort of Mario 1-1 thing of you jump above the Goomba and then you learn what the Goomba does. You learn you can bump your head on a
Exactly.
block. And it's that, but for the way that a zombie or a harpy or an armadillo or whatever moves down the track. And so I really like the way that you introduce mechanics across the course of the game.
Yep, exactly. So, yep, did a lot of that. And we spent a lot of time making sure that our charts were really top tier because we know that that's what players are going to be focused on the most. So, yeah, we would have amazing jamming sessions with Danny and with Ryan and the level designers where Danny would be like, you're not hitting, okay, you're hitting this on the and instead of on the like downbeat. And so then we would further develop our level design guidelines to be like, okay, this song is all about we need to hit this on the downbeat. And we would then experiment with changing BPM and changing, like, making things variable. And as the game progressed and as our level designers got better and better, we just increased the fidelity of our tracks. We used to only be able to put enemies on the beat, and then we got half beats so we could do
Sure.
offbeat
Yeah, yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
And then as soon as we did that, we're like, actually, we really want 16th notes,
Yeah, yeah,
really,
yeah.
because we want to be able to support duple meter and triplet meter tracks as well. And we just kept on refining things. We then, brought in additional clarity aids for, like, we added shadows under each monster,
Sure.
and
Hmm.
we added all the perfects and stuff. And then there's a lot of design that goes into the scoring. Did a huge amount of research, pulled in references from other games. Something else that we also try and do is we try and innovate in one area,
Sure.
but we try to not innovate everywhere, because
Mm.
sometimes you just don't
Yeah.
need it, and sometimes you just need to meet players where they're at. So vibe power is a good example. We had loads of concepts for, we want something that the player can do that can affect the variability of your scoring, because before we had vibe power, which is very similar to star power in Guitar Hero, there's still kind of only one way to play the game. There's, like, if you get all perfects on all of the monsters, then you will get the top score. And it's like, this is cool, but it feels like we'd love for there to be another layer of mastery on top of that. And we also had a concern from playtesters at the time where they're like, I love this track, but there's just a few sections that are really tough. And because our
Yeah,
game
yeah.
has, like, health instead of, something like a meter, they would find that, like, well, I love the track and the track's very within my skills to do, but I can't get past this one section. So we looked at what other games did, and we go back to one of our inspirations, Guitar Hero, and what players expect, and we're like, oh, they have star power, and it makes you
Yeah.
invincible while
Hmm.
that's happening, and it boosts your score. That serves our design goal. That serves our user story that we want to achieve. Do we need to innovate here? Probably not. Like, that's what players expect. Players are actually focused on the mechanical differences of monsters. Let's give something that players expect and that they know how to use. And as soon as they use vibe power, they're like, oh, star power.
Yeah.
Great.
100%.
And it served both things. And now we have a way for players who are looking for mastery to try and figure out when the best time to use their vibe power is to maximize their
Sure.
score.
Hmm.
And it serves double duty for players who are struggling to be like, there's a solo coming up, I'm going to hit vibe power so that I can just be immune from damage through this section.
Yeah, very, very cool. And so, returning back to the variety of types of games that you've worked on and found yourself in different kind of design roles on various genres, I'm curious if there's anything you learned while making motion control game, open world game, shooter game that you were then sort of able to apply to a rhythm game, and if maybe your unique background as someone who isn't a rhythm game developer might have helped shape this game in any specific way.
Yeah. In terms of me not being a rhythm game developer, I think that I'm so grateful for the team for helping me upskill here as well. And I spent countless hours with Danny B, our composer for Rift. He's tried to explain to me what a hemiola is. Like, in terms of musical theory, I still don't get it. I still can't get it. But I've learned a huge amount. But I do think that some of my lack of, like, nuance of, like, very specific musical terms has also helped me see the game in a way that a more casual audience would see the game, because there are definitely people who are musical experts that come to play rhythm games, but we know it is a quite, narrow market. Those players are awesome, and we definitely support those players and want those players to play our game and love those games. We also want to get players who are what we call rhythm curious, who love playing Guitar Hero, who love playing more casual rhythm games, who may be intimidated by some of the higher fidelity stuff. So where I've often joked where I come into the team, if we're talking for, we have great conversations about, like, should this armadillo be here or here? And I think something that I can do is kind of be like, well, from my perspective, I'm your rhythm curious player. I'm your player who is, I can play medium tracks, no problem, hard tracks, no problem, impossible's beyond me. So for me, I think this is pretty good. In terms of other games and how they've influenced the design of Rift, yeah, the thing we were talking about earlier in terms of meeting players' expectations, I think is huge. Every project I've worked on has been different in a major way. So the fact that I've always worked on different games, and I've never worked on the same game twice means that each time I join a team, it's easy for me to see where we need to meet players' expectations and where we don't need to. Far Cry, for example, we worked on a lot of open world design, and we made sure to make sure that the player guidance was good from mission to mission. But sometimes, and we did loads of innovative stuff, but sometimes you just need to place a treasure chest behind a waterfall.
Yeah, of
That's
course.
just what players want. And if you see every time I saw a waterfall in that game, I'm like, treasure chest needs to. And sometimes, we'd have long conversations about, it doesn't serve the narrative, doesn't work here. And I'm like, I understand that's all really great. You're totally right. I'm a player who is just playing on the couch. I see a waterfall. I'm like, treasure chest behind the waterfall.
Yeah, sure.
And if my expectations aren't met when I go to the waterfall, I'm like, oh, what? And now you've lost me. Now I'm not going to go explore the beautiful world that we've made. I'm also very passionate about. I've worked with loads of different designers, loads of different skill levels from loads of different backgrounds, and I love giving designers tools to be able to make good decisions by themselves. I'm really not the kind of game director who's like, do exactly this. I don't get on with the auteur kind of attitude towards game design, where it's like, I have a cohesive vision. This is it. Let's do exactly this. It's not really how games are made. Games are made, they're layered up over time, and each person on the team brings their own certain skills. The best way I found to develop games is not to have this immutable vision that's like, it must be this, is to be flexible, and is to give designers the tools they need to validate their own work. And then when something is working, we follow that. We follow the fun. And we did a lot of that with Rift, where we would. That's why challenge mode became a thing in Rift, because we have modifiers in the game that change the game based on certain. We have coda modifier. We used to have loads more, but we didn't feel like that they would be good throughout the entire game. We have like Gloom, for example, which hides a little bit of area before the action row. We have the mystery modifier, which changes everything to a question mark, which is really evil. And those just came out of brainstorming ideas, and we felt like, okay, these are really cool. How can we put them into the game without having to overhaul a bunch of systems? Let's make challenge mode, which is lets us have our cake and eat it too. We have a few things that do weird and wonderful things, and that just came from the team, right? And
Yeah.
I have a bunch of different tools for designers to use. Something that we talk about a lot is player skills. And we've talked about it a little bit, where are we testing the player's strategy here, or are we testing their timing, or are we testing their accuracy?
Hmm.
And often I find it really effective if things are feeling a bit samey, or if things are feeling a little bit like, how can we differentiate this a bit more? We go to our player skills, and we're like, okay, this map is mostly about your strategy. So it's not too difficult to hit the enemies as they're coming down, but it's about your strategy of do you recognize the mechanics that you need to hit for each monster? Whereas another map can be, this map is all about timing and
Yeah, sure.
accuracy. So this map should have simpler monsters, and it's just a much more dexterous challenge to complete it.
Yeah, very interesting.
So kind of breaking apart those complicated design problems is something that I've learned to methodically do by working on different games.
Sure. Let's talk a little bit more about you getting into being a rhythm game director. Two things. Number one, what is your experience with rhythm games? Are there rhythm games that you've been a fan of for a long time, or is it something that you've kind of found a passion for through working on this game?
Yeah, I'm definitely the rhythm curious game. So I played a lot of Crypt, never finished it. Still, I can never beat that game. I played obviously a lot of Guitar Hero, a lot of Rock Band, hours and hours of my university just playing. I try to expert certain tracks, and then nothing else sticks out. So I played a little bit of Osu, Elite Beat Agents. I love the zen feeling of playing rhythm games. I've often found that all the rhythm games that I've played, the music needs to come first, right? And if I'm not feeling the music, then I'm not super into.
Sure.
I know there's a rhythm game arcade in Toronto called eSpot, which is awesome. But it can be a little bit intimidating for me to go up to a machine and play, and all of the tracks sound very intense. They're all very drum and bass heavy, or they're all
Yeah.
very EDM heavy. And for me, it's like, I get that some people love that. That's not my vibe. And so the game can have as many cool mechanics as possible, but I'm just not into the music.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, coming in here to work on Rift and having Danny B's music and other composers that we're working with, like that's the thing that excited me the most about working on this project. And so again, it's been for me joining the project and me getting involved. It's all about like, okay, that thing is like solid. That's awesome. How can in game design and in mechanics, how can we support that as best as possible?
Yeah, 100%. Talking about the rhythm games that have inspired you, one thing I think is so interesting about Rift the Necrodancer is that it's not only just the Guitar Hero style tracks, the Rift battles that you do. There are also these mini game and boss battle sections that take inspiration from other rhythm games. And so it ends up being sort of a sampling platter of a bunch of different rhythm genres that I think is a really cool mixture and ends up breaking up the game flow a little bit and pacing the story mode, especially in an interesting way. And so let's talk a little bit about the challenges that you faced when emulating different rhythm game design styles. You have mini games and sections that are more Elite Beat Agents, as you said, as opposed to Rock Band. There's some that are a little bit more Parappa the Rapper. There's some that are a little bit more Rhythm Heaven. And so you get all of these different inspirations. And then you have to sit down and design one level that is emblematic of Parappa or Rhythm Heaven or Elite Beat Agents. And how difficult was that to figure out each time? And when was it that you knew that you wanted to sort of take multiple different rhythm game designs and put them into this one game?
Yeah. Oh man, I can't. I went on my talk about other rhythm games that inspired me. I can't believe I didn't mention Parappa the Rapper.
Yeah, yeah.
God, I played that so much. Like I can't. Yeah, Rhythm Heaven as well. I think I have like 4 different versions of the same Rhythm Heaven game.
How you feeling about the new one being announced?
Huge hype. Like honestly, being in the same like because we got to show off Rift in the Nintendo Direct, and
Great
then it was
point. Yeah,
either the same Direct or the
it was
I
the
think it
same
was the
direct.
same
Yes.
Direct that they
Mm-hmm.
just had like here's 5 other rhythm games
Yeah.
that are also coming out, and we're like, this is it. We're having a resurgence.
Yeah.
People love rhythm games, the quirky nature. So yeah, Rhythm Heaven was obviously a big inspiration for us to make our mini games. We knew from the start that we're like, hey, when we want to set players' expectations that this is not, you know, Rhythm Heaven has been building up their library of rhythm games for decades, and so we made sure to carefully be like, hey, we're not going to provide hundreds of mini games. That's not what this game's about. Rift of the Necrodancer is about the rhythm riffs. But to your point, we do have like some nice palette cleansers, some nice slice of life moments. So we very purposefully were like, okay, what's the goal of our mini games? The goal of our mini games is to provide that nice slice of life moment and to break up the pacing. It's not necessarily where we need to make them as difficult as possible, as
Absolutely.
rhythmically accurate as possible, as challenging as possible. We want players to have fun, and it's also a great vector for us to get a lot of personality into the game.
Sure.
So having Dove lead a yoga studio session, having like the Necrodancer flipping burgers. So we took a lot of inspiration, but we made sure to be like, hey, the goal of these mini games is that you play them 2, 3, 4 times, you have a great time, and then you go to the rhythm riffs to play. And we have harder versions of the mini games too. In terms of what we tried to emulate for other rhythm games, we kind of just followed the fun and did what was working. So we basically just take a smorgasbord of the things that we enjoy as players and developers, and then think how can we inject a lot of personality into these, and bring a lot of the world in and bring the characters in as well.
Was there any one of the minigame levels that you found particularly difficult to get working? Because again, they are all designed in slightly different ways, and you have to sort of learn a different design language to when you're making a Parappa level versus a Rhythm Heaven level. Which one of those sort of was most frustrating to create? I guess.
Totally. Yeah, the one that we have a lot of good feedback for is the show mini game. Like you say, we try to test different player skills for different mini games. So the burger mini game is testing your recall. Your like the Necrodancer will be like burger, cheese, cheese, this, so left, left, right, right, and then you have to just repeat the pattern left, left, right, right, which is very different from the show mini game where you constantly have to be like left, right, left, right. You have to constantly maintain that rhythm, and then sometimes you got to double time. one of the big challenges we found with that game, mini game, was that if you make one mistake, it's easy to then cascade into further mistakes. A challenge we've had across the game, early development, was the hit sound effects for when you missed. We got a lot of player feedback that sometimes the hit sound effect for when you miss kind of throws off your rhythm. And so we have worked a lot with playtesters, with the community, to make sure that, like, okay, we nerf that sound effect to make sure that it's not as affecting to the player. We have plans to further make this mini game like easier for players who just want to vibe and have a good time. Where we want to have, like, do stuff where there's a cooldown for when you make a mistake. We'll then have a cooldown of a period of time before, you can't just lose 5 health at once. So that's been the main challenge, and we've also brought on in things to the mini games where, like, if you fail 3 times in a row, we just pull up a splash screen that's like, you know what, no, you can skip this if you want. This shouldn't be
Yeah,
a
sure.
blocker to your progress.
Yeah.
Come back here and have fun if you want, but please don't have a terrible time. We want you to get back into the game and enjoy the rest of Rift.
Yeah. And so we've talked about the minigames a bit, but I'm also a little bit curious about the boss battles because, to be completely transparent, those were a part of the game that I think didn't really work for me because they are easier than basically all the rest of the game. And so it can make some of these narratively climactic moments feel a little bit less intense than the Rift battles, which I think, as we mentioned, do ramp up quite nicely. And then there's a little bit of a dip, I think, at the end of the chapters. So talk a little bit about the design of these boss battles, why you chose the sort of Osu Elite Agents style for the design of those levels, and how you sort of balance their difficulty in terms of having it be a climactic moment at the end of a chapter.
So our main focus for that was, a climactic moment that showed off the characters and showed off the antagonists. So we started with that. They are supposed to be a big climactic battle, but we never wanted them to be a hard skill check for the player. Boss fights are very interesting in game design in that in most games, boss fights act as a skill check for the skills that you've acquired during that
Yeah,
section of the game. Whereas Rift doesn't have the same progression,
sure.
right? Like, and because boss fights are a different game mode, it's not as if we can test your ability to be like, okay, we've just introduced zombies into this chapter. Now you're going to face the zombie boss fight, to test your understanding of that mechanic. So we went in knowing that. So we went in purposefully designing them in a way that, like, okay, they're their own separate thing. We want players to, punch out as our obvious inspiration.
Yeah, sure.
But similar to the mini games, the boss fights were never intended for our game to be the thing that players play for hours and hours on end. We still want that level of mastery, but that's why there's no leaderboards for boss fights, right? Because we don't want to set the
Oh, interesting.
expectation
Huh.
that you should be really grinding away on this. But for a while, we did show on the results screen for boss fights, we showed your rankings, like how many perfects you got, how many goods you got. And it was setting a different player expectation of like, oh, you should be getting all perfects. So relatively late in development, we kind of made the decision to change that to just be time instead.
Hmm.
Because the
Yeah.
boss fights aren't about being as accurate as possible. They're about going toe to toe with the boss. So if you dodge the boss, it's like you dodged it. Great. We're not too concerned if you got a perfect dodge or if you got a good dodge because it doesn't have any gameplay implications. It's not like a Dark Souls game where you get a perfect dodge and then you get extra iframes or something like that. I'm not surprised you're saying that the bosses are a little bit easier. Again, we wanted to have them in story mode as something the players enjoy to culminate the story, but we didn't want them to be a hard skill check for players. You mentioned using Osu and Elite Beat agents for the like shrinking circle. Again, that was a fairly late addition to the game based on a lot of
Oh,
player
okay.
feedback. For most of the game's development, those weren't there. It
Interesting. Hmm.
was very much punch out style. Look at the boss. Look at the animation tells. If Harmony is
Ah.
going left, attack. You have to look at Harmony and see the okay, she's going left. I need to dodge right.
Yeah, gotcha.
And we found that that worked really well for some of the earlier bosses, but it was really difficult for us to then progress that difficulty because you're spending most of your time in rhythm riffs. And then by the time you come to a boss fight, it's kind of like you're getting acclimatized again. And we didn't feel like it was a good player experience to then throw you into the last boss fight and be like, you're gonna have to be like frame perfect in telling, okay, when the Necrodancer wiggles their cloak to the left with one finger up, that's this kind of attack. And we did have that for a while. Whereas something like Punch Out can do that because you're just playing Punch Out and you're just, you
100%.
get into the
Yeah.
zone, right? You're just
Yeah.
focused on like, okay, I'm learning these tells, I'm figuring it out. Because it's a different game mode, we wanted players just to, have more fun and get through it. So we introduced the Osu circles fairly late so that we didn't want to test players as much on their ability to spot tiny changes in animations. We wanted to
Sure.
test
Gotcha.
your rhythm, and we wanted to for you to have a fun climactic battle. We do, however, have hard versions of each boss fight, which takes out the circles.
Oh,
So if
interesting.
you do
Okay.
want to play, the OG boss fights that rely purely on your ability to look at the animation tells and make a decision based on that, you can go play the hard mode versions, and they're pretty spicy.
Yeah. Yeah, and so that I think the final question I want to ask is about difficulty balancing because as you mentioned there are four main difficulties: easy, normal, hard, and impossible. And they ramp up, I would say, exponentially between the different difficulties. I'm pretty good at normal or medium, but I'll drop myself into a hard level and be like, "What? How am I supposed to do this? It feels like twice as difficult." And I think that's a fun way to sort of like set a challenge or a goal for myself of like, oh, okay, I really actually do need to up my skills if this is not even the top level of difficulty. But in terms of balancing four different difficulties in order to appease multiple skill levels of an audience, how did you make sure that each skill level was fun in terms of playtesting, in terms of you and your ability to play it and your team members' ability to play it? How is balancing all sorts of different levels of difficulty in this rhythm game?
Great question. So we rely on our playtesters a lot and people at the studio of different skills levels to, yeah, each track goes through so many different rounds of feedback. What you're seeing is the product of, multiple rounds of feedback to make it easier, to make it harder, to make it more readable. We had loads of guidelines for each difficulty. So in general, for easy mode, we would say, hey, everything's on the beat.
Sure.
Or if things are on half beats, they are very deliberately half beats, and you were not challenging too much. And we use things like double hit monsters or different combinations, very sparse. For medium, we have a mentality of vibing. We want you to vibe with the track in medium. We want you to always feel like you're playing the music, like you're feeling that you're playing each musical motif. But again, we don't want you to feel like you're being unfairly challenged or that you're not ready for that challenge. In hard modes, where we start to take the gloves off, where we're like, okay, we want to make things as musically accurate as possible. If there's a note that's being hit and it's not a half beat, it's a swung beat in a 16th note, then we want you to hit that. And so
Yeah,
that's where you'll
sure.
see things being like more staggered. That's where we'll start to challenge more of your ability to like your dexterous ability on the controls. So you might have to hold left while tapping right,
Yeah, yeah,
which
yeah.
we would never test you for in medium. That's where we've got a lot of the same feedback of like going from medium to hard is like, oh,
Yeah. It's a shocker.
it's intentional. We know that players come to a crypt is difficulty. We have a metric for easy mode. You should be able to pass first try. Like most players should be able to pass first try, unless this is your first rhythm game, unless you're not an experienced player. Medium for rhythm gamers, it's again first try, maybe second try, maybe third if you're not, but you should very clearly be making really big progress each time. For hard mode, that's where we're like, you might need to go practice this.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why
Definitely.
we love calling it hard mode. We have a practice mode where you can then go in and practice a certain range of
Ah,
something. And hard mode is we want to meet players' expectations of what they expect hard mode in a Necrodancer game to be. We have a phrase of like, you need to be trying to survive in hard mode. You need to be like, everybody has that gaming moment where they're like this on the couch, and then they sit up and they're like,
yeah, of
actually, okay,
course. You have to lock in.
great. So hard mode for us is like, you got to lock in. You got to lock in if you want to pass this. Impossible mode is gloves are completely off. This is as hard as our level designers could possibly make it.
Sure.
And we have a bunch of tracks that only one person at the studio can
Yeah,
beat,
sure.
and that even Ryan Clark can't beat a bunch of the impossible tracks. But again, we give them out to our community and they demolish them
Oh,
immediately.
cool. Yeah.
So as long as it is possible, as long as it does feel fair, again, quite a late addition to the game. It used to be called expert mode, and we were finding that players were like, "Hey, expert mode is just too tough. It's really difficult." And we're like, "Well, players are expecting this. We're getting feedback from a bunch of players that they do want this difficulty. How can we better set players' expectations?" And Ryan's idea was like, let's call it impossible mode,
Yeah.
so that there's no expectation that these kind of tongue in cheek being like, it's impossible, so
Yeah.
that when you fail it, it's like, well, it's impossible mode.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And immediately we changed nothing in a bunch
Yeah.
of the level design, but we then gave a new build to our community, to our playtesters, and they're like, oh, the balancing's way better. Oh, it feels
Interesting.
awesome.
Wow. Huh. Because it's based on expectation.
Just because we
100%.
changed it to be called impossible mode. So, and then impossible mode again is where you're like, we fully expect you to fail the track in the first 10 seconds
Of course.
if you're not
Yeah.
paying attention. And you got to go practice, and it should feel like real fist bump, like, oh, I did it right at the end. And then you should do it, and you should be able to beat the track and just get like a C rank and be like, you did it, but you got a C rank.
You have room to grow. Absolutely.
And we did a lot of playtesting in person in the studio, and we invited some people in to play. And so watching people play is always very fascinating for us. And so we got a lot of people struggling on hard. So we have lots of analytics in the game that will tell us, like, we can see a bunch of charts that say, like, okay, lots of people are failing on Revenge hard. Oh, is it too difficult? Maybe it's too difficult. But then we would also see that lots of people are retrying,
Ah.
so they're not just failing, but they're hitting R to retry. So we can then hypothesize that, like, oh, people are failing, but they are playing it again and again and again, and they're enjoying, the challenge. And then we would watch people in the studio play, and we'd see that on their faces. We'd see them lock in, and we'd see them kind of start to ignore us as they get further and further into the track. We saw the opposite too, right? We would see some tracks where they're like, this isn't fun. Like, I'm just hitting a
Sure.
wall. And as
Yeah.
soon as people then go like this and sit back, and they're like, I'm going to play something different, then we're like, okay, we should tweak this track. We should make it easier. We should make it more readable. Or even, like your point about setting expectations, we should set the intensity rating higher. So that when you fail, you're like, oh, well, I failed, but it is an intensity 20 out of 30. So maybe my intensity is more 15.
Sure. Yeah. No, I think that's very cool as a way to, on the fly, sort of adapt to feedback and balance the game as best as possible. And I beat the game. I was able to. I've tried some hard
Nice.
levels, and so I'm still improving my skill. I would consider myself in the rhythm curious, where I like rhythm games, but I don't like getting stuck for too long. I'm very much the vibe player, and so I think that's why normal or medium is my speed. Of like, I want to get into it. I want to hear the music, but I don't want to sit there all day. That's just my design appeal.
Between us, that's where I'm at too. Like,
Yeah.
I'm in my 30s. I also don't have time to play like one game. Well, apart from Rift, I got thousands of hours in Rift.
Of course.
But yeah, I'm the same as you. I want to get home. I want to vibe, and that's what we wanted to give players too. We wanted to give you the, like, hey, if you're here to vibe, you're here to vibe. We got the difficulty for you. If you are here to, like, impossible mode, one track, we even have a modifier in the game called Coda modifier, based off of the Crypto the Necrodancer Coda mode, and it's, you instantly fail if you press an errant input. You only have
Holy
1
moly.
HP.
Oh
You
no.
have to get every perfect. It instantly fails you if you don't get a perfect. And we put this in, and we're like, no one's gonna be able to do this, right? Like, this is like, technically, we know mathematically it is possible. If we built a robot to do it, you could do it. So that's where we're like, okay, this feels doable, but people are made of, brains and flesh, and we're like human muscles. We're
Yeah.
like, this isn't going to be like, this is probably going to take somebody 2 years to do within a week. One of our playtesters is just like, did it. What else you got? And they beat one of our hardest
That's
tracks
amazing.
on Coda mode, and we're all just like, oh my goodness. And we're glad we have that really high skill ceiling for players that want it. But again, that's optional. We've got a lot of room for playing the game if you just want to vibe.
Very cool. My final question is going to be sort of a reminiscent thing. I want you to think back to your earliest gaming memories, your games you loved when you were a kid, and think about the games that might have inspired you to be a designer. Are there any games you sort of reference as touch points or think of as moments where you were playing it and thinking, man, I really want to do this?
Yeah. I got two answers for you, if that's okay, if I can be greedy. One incredibly cliche is Ocarina of Time. That's I don't know if you can see, but I've got the Lego set
Yep. I was looking at
for the
that in the
Deku
background
Tree.
earlier.
That game to me when I played it as a kid, and it blew my mind in terms of what games could be. I remember very vividly like doing the first three temples, getting the stones. It was my first Zelda game, and being like, "Oh, I'm almost done. Hey,
Yeah.
cool. I'm going to go to the Temple of Time, and that's it. I'm going to do the last boss. Cool." And I remember being there. I had to go to like some after school club or whatever, so I had like an hour to play, and I just discovered like the time skip, and I just discovered it, and I was like, "Oh my god, what? There's like 7 more temples? Are you kidding me? I'm a different. I got different items, and I couldn't focus for like the rest of the day, rest of the week. So I was like, I had no idea that games could be this big and this
Sure.
large, and like I was telling everybody, like, as God's like, do you know that there's like 7? And they're,
Yeah.
no way. This one, I was like, yeah, way. It's such a cliche, but it really did inspire me to like, games can be more than just I sit down and try and get a high score. They can be these real emotional experiences. As a game developer, the game that inspired me most was God of War on the
Oh,
PS2.
cool. Sure.
Uh, it is an amazing game, so that inspired me. But the thing that inspired me most was on the PS2 disc, they had an extras menu,
Hmm.
and they had a bunch of dev diaries
Cool.
on
Yeah.
that. And I remember just demolishing those as like as a I probably shouldn't have been playing the game. I don't think I was 18, but I was playing the game and just seeing Corey talk about the game and seeing like the developers be like, "Oh, here's what it means by alpha. We got to alpha. Alpha means when you have most of the game in and you can play it from start to finish." And they had a bunch of footage there that was like grey block footage, and
Yeah.
they had
Very cool.
interviews on there speaking about, "Oh yeah, the we used to have a flying level where Kratos would fly around, but we had to cut that for these reasons. Maybe you'll see it in a new game." And it just again blew it open for me as a thing. I was like, wait a second, people are making these games. It's not just something that magically happens. Here I get to see people talk through the creative process and talk through, how they remodeled the Cyclops, because there's one part that were like, oh, we had to put a loincloth on the Cyclops because initially we didn't have a loincloth on the Cyclops, and it was pretty weird to,
Yeah.
be at head height, with Kratos. And just seeing again all the problems that you face as as a designer and as a game developer. From that point on, I started looking at games in an entirely new light of like, well, how would I solve that problem, or why is that crate placed there? Instead of playing Final Fantasy or something and being like, oh, I got this item, cool, I'd be like, well, why did the game developer give me this item right now?
Sure.
They probably
Hmm.
want me to use it. Like if I'm starting to get antidotes, I'm now like, oh, I'm probably going to start to get poisoned
Yep.
in this area because that's why the designer chose to place them there. So yeah, hugely inspiring, and that's why I love talking to you about game design. I'm a fan of your channel as well because it's
Thank you.
it gets people to see that game developers are real people, and that it's kind of I'm very passionate about demystifying the game dev process,
Oh yeah, me too.
because it is a lot of trial and error, and it's a lot of take your best guess, and it's a lot of just playtest and follow the fun, and do what you think, and use the tools that you have at your disposal well. I'm a big proponent of there's no secret sauce, there's no one size fits all, there's no
Yeah.
like this is the way to make games and that's the only way. You only need to look on Steam and see that there's tons of
Yeah.
different games, different styles, and some are for me and some are not for me, and some that are really not for me that I'm like, I don't get it. Sell
Yeah.
millions and millions of copies, and I'm like, oh, they're doing something right, for certain subsets of players.
Yeah. So thank you very much for joining me, Aaron. I had a great time talking to you about Rift. Of course, if you enjoyed this conversation and you're listening to this, I will leave a link in the description to the Steam page and the Nintendo page for you to go buy a copy of Rift. And also, Aaron, I think you mentioned before there is some stuff you guys are working on that people might be able to get excited for coming
Oh
soon.
yeah. So we just recently released we shadow dropped the game on Switch, At the same time, we released a Celeste song pack, which is very exciting. It was awesome to be able to work with Lana Rain. That was awesome. We have a lot of cool DLC lined up. We also announced that we were going to be working on a Pizza Tower DLC, so that's going to be coming soon. And then into the future, we're keeping supporting Rift. We got so many exciting collaborations lined up that I can't wait to announce
Very
for you
cool.
all.
Yeah. Thank you very much for joining me. I hope everyone enjoyed, and we'll see you next time.